Hello everybody, my name is KirkpattieCake. I am an author and robot, and today, as you can see, we're doing another book review video. This one is actually for a second in a trilogy, and I did the review for the first in the trilogy last week, so if you want to check that out, it's a rough, it's something rough. But before we get started, just the normal reminders is down in the description below. LBRY is accepting now for July, so if you'd like to join in on the community fun, check out the prompt to be featured in a video. And then I think that's pretty much it. I'm not going to waste your time. Today I'm doing a book review for LBRY's Patchwork. This is the second book in the Stormfront series or trilogy. Let me know your thoughts if you've read this or what you think at the end of this video if you get a sense of the genre, but I am so baffled. You see what I did there? Because every chapter that is Vic's starts with I am. Never mind. Vic Corin isn't the only one that's confused. I am too. Between the genre, the plot, and the major plot elements, this is supposed to be a romance, and the relationship between Kelly and Vic is, well, it's not good. Now, is this book a sci-fi? Is it a romance? Is it a tech fantasy? Is it a Greek play? I don't know, but both book 1 and 2 defied what their stated plot was on their Goodreads page, on the back, or on the inside of the book. But before we get into that, let's talk about the story in its details, how it currently is. The novel opens with Vic trying to get into a control panel because there's an attack going on the moon base that she lives on. Once the scene is established, though, it flashes back to what was going on before Vic was in this moment, like immediately before this. Kind of like the record scratch moment of, "What? I bet you're wondering how I got here." But really, it's just her sitting down to dinner with Kelly and commiserating about how she can't be intimate with Kelly because of the rape at the ending of the previous book. And Kelly gets mad at Vic for being called into another emergency work dealio for the third time in 2 weeks. Cut back to the present. Long story short, members of an opposing merc team, the Sunfires, attacked the bar on the moon base called the Alpha Dog in order to find Vic because they want the tech that's in her head. Vic pretty much annihilates all of them on her own with some damage that leaves her emotionally crippled and unable to move. Also, probably important to note that one of the soldiers during this whole thing had infrared eyes, meaning he's already got some robot parts in him, but don't worry. This isn't ever brought up again, and we don't have any answers as to how the Starfires have that or how far their technology actually goes. It's just sort of there, and then it's gone. Meanwhile, as Vic is in the action scene, Kelly's sitting in their room alone, just thinking about how sexually frustrated she is because Vic can't get over the rape from the last book. So she calls an old professor of hers to ask for advice, and the professor suggests that Kelly get into Vic's head and force herself on Vic, seducing her until she likes it again. No joke, sounds like a totally legit advice, for real, from a mental health professional. After the phone call, and with Kelly being unhealthily needy and attached, she calls Vic's teammates while they're out in battle to see what she's doing, how she's doing, where they are. Then, when she's not happy with the answer, she leaves to join them in the battlefield with no training, no weapons, and complete vulnerability. But hey, she gets there at some point around where the battle site is locked for shutdown and a grenade has gone off, and she's impatient to see Vic, who is locked on the other side of the locked doors. Eventually, the bar is clear for medical staff to enter, and Kelly goes in as well. She wants to help Vic emotionally purge at that moment because Vic is crippled, but Vic doesn't want that help because she wants to be more independent and deal with it on her own. After Vic's emotional state is taken care of, she's taken to the medbay to have her physical self looked at. While she hasn't had a physical doctor in almost a year since Dr. Whitehouse was taken out, a new one should be arriving any minute, and wouldn't luck have it, the doctor is Vic's sadistic ex-girlfriend, and the sadistic is, very specifically over-the-top sadistic, actually. Vic doesn't remember much, but just as she's being checked up on, she recalls a memory of having sex with her ex when her ex legit just smacks the crap out of her and then calls Vic a baby for not liking it. The machines that Vic is hardwired to go haywire when Vic's thinking about these nasty memories. Then, when asked about why Vic is so freaked out, Kelly tells Dr. Ex-Girlfriend about Vic's rape. The doctor tells Kelly that the brain tech has solidified all memories in Vic's head in 1080p, so all of the details are there, and she's not going to get rid of them anytime soon. She's likely to suffer from that, and because of the details, that's likely why she's suffering so hard from the trauma. She first suggests they wipe Vic's memories, but then she says that if Kelly wants to help Vic heal from her trauma, then she should force herself on Vic and make new positive memories to focus on. The two finally pack their bags for what we're told was the main plot of the novel, a family reunion and a birthday party vacation. Vic's freaked out about meeting all of Kelly's family and friends, so she downloads private personal files on all of them to get to know the ins and outs of who they are, what they like, so she can know what to talk about, while also feeling angsty and suicidal and lamenting having to do this in the first place. They rent a vehicle, and while traveling through space, Kelly works to relieve Vic of her tension and her clothing. Vic panics during the sexy time, so Kelly has her talk about anything that's on her mind, and Vic shares the battle at Alpha Dog, the bar, was with a dude who wanted the tech inside of her head. Sometime after the sexy time, but still traveling through space, Vic wakes up from nightmares and vomits. I don't know why this was necessary to include, she doesn't do it any other time, but it's there in this. As Vic goes through personal files for everyone going to Kelly's shindig, she comes across a man named David freaking Locker, who is some rando that Kelly went to school with, but there's no other information on him at all, so Vic assumes that he joined the military rank somewhere, and she's sus. I'd be sus too. Why is someone who Kelly isn't friends with coming to her family reunion / birthday party? There's some mild space chase because Kelly's and Vic's rental ship is being tracked by the Sunfire Merc group that want Vic's tech. They disable the tracking, dodge the attack, and then crash land on the resort island. Vic is mortified because all of Kelly's families and friends saw that happen. One of the resort staff helps Vic and Kelly to shore, focusing on Kelly and making Vic jealous. When they get to the shore, the two are greeted by Kelly's family, and the family says how amazing that landing was. And then David freaking Locker randomly shows up going, she had help, you know. Vaguely referring to VC1, Vic's AI companion that's in her head. Apparently, Vic being a bot is a secret. Now, I didn't realize that it was a secret, considering how many people on the base called Vic out for being a freak tech monstrosity. It seems like everybody on the moon base knows, so we're supposed to now believe that it was a secret. I don't know. While Kelly and Vic find their way to their cabin, David freaking Locker tags along, and Kelly thinks about how they used to date, or rather, how they went on one date, but she called it quits real fast because it seemed like he was more interested in betting an empath for that special sexual feeling relationship thing that comes with doing it with an empath, as opposed to forming an actual relationship. He now works for Biotech, though, which is the company that manufactured Vic's bot parts. Vic calls her teammates, Lyle and Alex, to tell them about the vehicle crash and the hacking and the Sunfires. They offer to look into the vehicle bugging situation, but she declines their help, making the phone call completely pointless because nothing comes out of it. She then calls the rental company guy to threaten him, show him footage that she suddenly hacked out of his cameras, and then a picture of his bank account that she also just suddenly randomly hacked to incriminate him and get him to spill what he knows. How did she do this? Psst. Don't ask questions. We don't ask questions around here. This all happens the second Vic needs it because that's just how things work around here, alright? The dude questions how she knows so much and she just goes, because I'm better than you, fuckface. Okay, so that's not exactly what she says, but it's the same vibe. Kelly reunites with her academy friends that, she went to school with to become an empath or to her therapist abilities, whatever it is, and they all fawn over Vic, while Vic is acting like an angsty teenager afraid of human contact. All of the friends plus Vic go out on a shopping spree, ending with Vic staying behind because she doesn't have any formal outfit for the dance that's at the end of this adventure. She buys a tux and an engagement ring at a heckled down price. While returning back to her cabin, she runs into, guess who? If you said David freaking Locker, you're correct. And he reminds her that she is not human, and this sends her into a depressed, suicidal episode, so Vic decides that she won't propose to Kelly because she's not good enough at all anyway. Feeling the strong emotions, though, Kelly meets Vic at the dock and comforts her. Kelly's mom says they're working hard to make sure that Vic's human rights be recognized because obviously, since she's part robot or totally robot, maybe, I don't know, she has no human right recognition. Vic's anxious and in pain, but the next morning, Vic and Kelly borrow a boat and go do things on the water just for fun to try to relax. And then guess who shows up again? You got it. It's David freaking Locker. And when they're done on the water, he gets mad at them for taking the boat that he had actually reserved and they did not reserve. He goes out on the water and gets pulled under by some octosharks because that's apparently a thing. Vic races to help David freaking Locker so Kelly doesn't feel him die and get distressed. After all of this is said and done, the boat looks suspicious, like someone was trying to kill David freaking Locker. Who would want to kill David freaking Locker? That's what Vic is wondering. So then she goes to the boat rental guy to talk to him about these suspicious circumstances. While talking to the boat guy, she learns that the boat sales guy is actually somebody from her Merc group who was hired to kill David freaking Locker because he's got loose lips and he keeps talking about Vic the Robot Project, which is apparently supposed to be a secret. Kelly and Vic return to their cabin, and Kelly is pissed off that Vic is keeping any secrets from her whatsoever, including secrets that Kelly's mom vaguely talks about to Vic in front of Kelly, and that's the a vague proposal conversation. Kelly tries to manipulate answers out of Vic, but when her manipulation doesn't work, she yells and storms upstairs. Vic goes into another depressed episode and leaves the house in the morning, apologizing to Kelly for what she's done. Vic ends up walking to Kelly's parents' house where she thinks about her prom night, and Kelly's parents ask if Vic is going to propose. They get excited when Vic says yes. Suddenly, we're at the reunion party in the evening, and Vic and Kelly haven't talked since their fight, but Kelly is still looking for Vic. Vic is sitting at a random table with one of Kelly's cousins playing guitar like a master act. Why? I don't really know, because then Kelly and Vic get up and go and dance while VC1 manipulates the radio to play the songs that they want. As Kelly's favorite song comes on, she's taken away to cut the cake when Vic had wanted to propose in that moment. I never understood why Kelly didn't drag Vic off with her to go and do that, but she's just like, oh, I see you got a sad face. I gotta go and do this. Be back later. Okay. Thanks to David freaking Locker and his loose lips, Vic hears people talking about her being a freak and knowing that she adjusted the radio with her robotic superpowers and falls into another suicidal episode. She grabs her gun and brings it to her head. Kelly's friends all come running to comfort her. However, Kelly is nowhere to be seen despite how all of her friends were just singing happy birthday to Kelly, but somehow they made it to Vic before Kelly. Vic loses control of her body due to extreme emotions and collapses on the ground. Some random ship also lands in the background as Vic's body shuts down. Kelly finally shows up at the scene to inject Vic with some emergency emotion sedative suppressor thing, and Kelly's friends then ask if David freaking Locker's rumors about Vic being a robot are true, and all of a sudden, Kelly finally knows what's been bothering Vic because somehow she hadn't heard any of these rumors the whole time that they'd been there. Kelly confirms the rumors, but begs her friends to not say anything because she could get in trouble for it if anybody found out that she broke an NDA. Vic recovers from her panic and apologizes for being such a failure. Kelly comforts her and says David freaking Locker is wrong and she is not a robot, but hey-oh, wouldn't luck have it? David freaking Locker walks up right at that moment to say, bruh, she's totally a piece of metal. Like, what is wrong with you? Kelly punches him in the face, and then Special Agent Carl, the boat guy, jumps out of the bushes to tell Kelly and Vic that they must flee because the bad guys are on their way here. Oh, it's too late. Turns out these Sunfire bad guys were also hiding in the bushes alongside Carl, and they jump out and grab Kelly to negotiate getting Vic to get in their plane to go away. Despite being drunk and emotionally weak, Vic shoots the guy with expert precision after saying that the AI system couldn't lock on it well enough, and the two of them flee to a small getaway ship set up for them by Carl. Carl then kills David freaking Locker off the page and then informs Kelly and Vic that David freaking Locker is dead. They go through some space battle in the atmosphere only to crash land on another nearby planet. Their ship is struck by lightning in the middle of this lightning storm, which then zaps Vic's electronic ability from her body entirely, and so now she is dying. Also, do you know where they landed? Right next to an abandoned research facility in top condition because the people that take care of it come once every like 3 or 4 months to make sure everything is working, and then they just leave again. So They try to get in there, but Vic is dying and can't make it. She can't move. So Vic tells Kelly to get inside of the building where she will be protected with some kind of force field that will stop Vic's dying emotions from reaching Kelly's empathic abilities. And so Kelly's not going to die from grief. Kelly sits on the other side of the facility door, listening to Vic's final words, and she finds an engagement ring in Vic's coat, which she is now wearing. As Vic dies, she proposes to Kelly. And you'd think the suffering would be over here, but it's not. Kelly's pretty much hanging out in the facility alone for a while. She can't transmit anything out as VC1 eventually communicates with Kelly and says, "Stay put. I've disabled communications for a little while. Don't tell anybody that I exist." And she's found a new body for Vic. We're now taken to some random lab on some other random planet that we've never been to before where there's a Vic clone suddenly. VC1 injects all of Vic's memories into the Vic clone and wakes her up. She also tells Vic that she is cleared of the memory of the rape so that she shouldn't have a problem with intimacy or with PTSD anymore because the details of that event are gone. Almost like she could have done this the whole time 10 months ago, and this was a cosmetic conflict that had nothing to do with anything. That really honestly pissed me off while I was reading this. But whatever, VC1 informs Vic that her sadistic ex-girlfriend was doing these cloning experiments after she stopped being Dr. Whitehouse's assistant. VC1 and Vic then leave this random planet, another abandoned facility, mind you, because the Dr. ex-girlfriend and her team only come by every couple of months to check on their experiments, and then the facility is completely unguarded, completely unmanned for some reason, despite these high-level, high-security, high-stakes experiments in here. There's nobody here watching any of it, because why bother? They go to pick up Kelly from the planet that she is on and bury Vic's body because no one can know that she's a clone since clones are illegal, and if people knew that Vic was a clone, they would kill her immediately. Kelly and Vic then have sex before being informed that rescuers are on the way, and that's the end of the book, aside from the epilogue where another clone wakes up while Dr. Ex-Girlfriend is there, and the clone kills everybody before declaring herself the real Vic Corin, getting it ready for book number 3. So basically, the big takeaway for me here is that Vic isn't a clone, she's a Terminator-style robot. So it really kind of irked me that she used the term clone and she's pretending that she's a human, because she's not. With that said though, let's get into the discussion. The book starts with Kelly and Vic being an official item. This means there are ethical problems with Kelly keeping her job as Vic's emotional support person in field. I mean, it's already been an ethical issue for them to have a relationship in the first place and to be an emotional mediator. I don't really understand how this is acceptable for a top merc operation in the galaxy, and would have liked some clarification on were they breaking the rules or why were rules changed for them in this situation. It could have been an interesting caveat or an interesting place for drama or story if Kelly had to get used to Vic trusting somebody else with her emotions rather than relying on Kelly because they're dating and she couldn't emotionally purge on that person anymore. Obviously, Kelly's already got problems with Vic having any secrets, but adding a different therapist in because she couldn't see Kelly anymore to that extent would have been an interesting complication. Now, what really bothers me is when a stated plot doesn't match the contents of the book. It's kind of like a bait and switch. So the stated plot specifically mentions going on a holiday on a tropical planet, but this doesn't come into play until about 40% of the way through the book. It also makes it sound like it's going to be relaxing and planned, but the way that it's written, this is all for Kelly and her family, not at all for Vic, and Vic is more or less miserable with the idea of being around Kelly's family. If Kelly is afraid of Vic being over-encumbered, over-emotional, over-stressed, and all of these things, I don't really understand why Kelly would take Vic to a place where she's going to have to be very intimate with people, and especially what are considered high-value people because they are within Kelly's social circle, so Vic is going to want to impress them. This is not a very good situation or very good setup for a therapist to go into if her whole point is to get Vic to relax. Kelly is just not a very good empath. She's not a very good friend, and she's not a very good therapist, if you ask me, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The plot summary also implies that the vacation unravels when opponent merc group comes after Vic, but the novel starts with the opponent merc group already pursuing her, and everything on the island is devoid of the merc group until suddenly it's like 80% of the way through, and a couple of mercs jump out of the bushes to try and take Vic, and immediately get shot down, and then they're gone. So it's not, the mercs coming after her tech are not really actually a big part of the plot. They're just kind of randomly thrown in and minimized their job there. The official plot also mentions that Vic's ex has her own depraved plans, but the ex is introduced at about 30% of the way through and then disappears for the whole book, only to be mentioned again at the end as a way for Vic to come back to life and then to be murdered in the epilogue. She had no point of even existing because that whole thing was not developed. It's like, oh look, a sadistic ex, here's some memories and clones. I mean, it would have been more interesting if she was more heavily involved. She insisted on coming to the island to help take care of Vic in the medical way in which she was supposed to, and there was more shady business between them. But she was so pointless to have in the story because of how little she actually did. Speaking of Vic coming back to life, we're at 90% of the way through the novel when suddenly we're transported to a random lab on a random planet with a Vic clone. Not a bunch. Not even other people, but just one Vic clone. Because Vic walks around the facility a little bit and doesn't say anything about seeing anybody else, period. Now, cloning was never hinted at any portion of this book. The first one or the second one. In the first one, there was turning people into cyborgs or robots where the robots had the human faces. Why, I'm not really sure. But Vic spends very little time walking around the lab. She does mention walking around it a little bit to get out and to find a space pod, but you would think in a room where there is one clone, there would be more clones, or she would pass somewhere with clones, or she would be curious about where she is, especially as VC1 tells her that she's a clone. But she has zero curiosity whatsoever. She doesn't care about finding out what's going on or who is making clones of her. She just picks up and goes. There's not even any curiosity behind this when VC1 tells Vic that her ex-girlfriend is behind this. It's just kind of there. Let's talk about the characters now. So, Vic doesn't show any ability to grow as a character or to work through her problems. For the majority of the book, she is still in as bad a position as she was in the first book, but maybe a little worse off. She comes off like an angsty teenager in this book, but she didn't come off like an angsty teenager as much in the first book. Her epiphany at the end of book 1 was, I'm both human and a machine. But at the start of this one, and for the entirety of this one, she's back to assuming that she's just a full machine. She's got low self-esteem and traumatized and blames herself for everything that happens to her. In all honesty, Vic is a decent rendition of a very emotionally damaged person who needs a lot of help. But for the most part, Vic is an angsty robot, unchanged by anything that happens to her in the previous book or throughout this book, so it's just a continuation of the same identity insecurities. VC1 also helped Vic multiple times throughout book 1, and in this book, when Vic dies, VC1 legitimately brings her back to life by finding her another body. Still, in the closing of this novel, literally in the last chapter or two, Vic worries that VC1 will take over her body and not give her back control. Because character development? What is that? So even though VC1 has proved numerous times that Vic has nothing to worry about, that she believes in Vic, that she wants Vic to be independent, Vic has to make even that comment at the end because she has because she does not understand learning, apparently. Vic's paranoia is constant from start to finish. It's unwarranted, and it's never actually addressed in the story. It's also oddly inconsistent at times. Like, she's paranoid, but not paranoid enough to check the rental vehicle for bugging. She's paranoid, but she says straight up that she has full control over VC1, but also fears VC1 taking over. And it's never addressed in the story among her other traumatized problems. And then, on the other hand, we have Kelly. I mentioned how she was controlling in the first book, but bro, it got so much worse in this book. And I'm like, is this seriously supposed to be a romance, or are these supposed to be two damaged people? So she gets upset and even angry at the beginning of the book because Vic doesn't need her as much to level off her emotions, and Kelly wants Vic to need her. You know, imagine the person that's 600 pounds or more and wants to lose weight so they can be independent, and then the spouse that had met this person when they were already overweight and enjoyed being needed, and they became angry and toxic when they saw their partner losing weight and becoming more independent. And so partner 2 over here, the caretaker, was purposefully sabotaging partner 1 because they wanted to be needed. That's the kind of relationship that you have between Kelly and Vic, except it's emotional baggage that's holding Vic down, and Kelly wants Vic to be emotionally damaged to the point that she needs Kelly. Then there's that moment that I mentioned in the synopsis where Kelly tries to pry secrets out of Vic. First, she uses a gentle voice, a coaxing voice. She's like, come on, you love me. Just tell me the secrets that you're hiding. And then when that doesn't work, she touches Vic and tries to manipulate her emotions because that touch strengthens their empathetic bond. It helps her connect more to Vic's emotions, and basically it helps her read Vic's mind. And when that doesn't work, she yells that Vic doesn't love her, and if Vic did love her, then she wouldn't keep any secrets. And then she blames Vic for her having an outburst by saying, well, if you didn't keep secrets from me, this wouldn't have happened. This is such an abusive behavior. It's not a romantic partner, but this chick is also supposed to be Vic's working emotional manager to help her deal with her trauma, with her low self-esteem, with her suicidal urges. But you've got like the borderline personality over here dealing with the super depressed suicidal one over here, and it is not a healthy combo. And the borderline over here is also kind of a narcissist. This whole behavior violates the emotional stability that Vic needs to not only raise her self-esteem, but be able to mentally cope. Vic gets all of her self-worth by what Kelly thinks of her, and when Kelly does this to her, she is controlling and destroying Vic's esteem so that she can control Vic better. Kelly also showed her control over Vic in the first book by impeding and invading Vic's privacy when Vic didn't want her to come in, but she wanted to anyway. But then she doesn't let Vic come in when they're fighting to level it out or to have a conversation. It was all whenever Kelly wanted to talk. Whenever Kelly wanted to do something, Kelly was the one to decide. Vic did not have any control whatsoever. This book starts out with her being overly clingy by calling Vic's friends to basically see where she's at when she was just called into a job. Kelly can't stand being separated from Vic, she can't stand Vic being independent, and she can't stand Vic having a thought of her own that's private. And that's what fuels a lot of Kelly's actions. She's supposed to be a psychic empath. She's supposed to be one of the closest to Vic's emotions and be psychically connected to what she needs. But she's nowhere near Vic when she's having another suicidal episode in this book. And this isn't the only time that Kelly does this. Before they reach the tropical planet, Kelly has it in her head that her job is to distract Vic from the traumatic memories and keep her busy. But she agrees to let Vic go shopping on her own even after she's been depressed and emotionally distant while on the planet. What's more, Kelly is supposed to be Vic's girlfriend and her therapist. She's well aware of Vic's issues, the identity stuff, the self-esteem stuff, the social phobia. They're surrounded by Kelly's peers for Kelly, not for Vic's relaxation. And one of the things was that this vacation was supposed to be for Vic's relaxation, but then Kelly specifically picked a vacation that would stress Vic out. And despite all of that, she abandons Vic to go cut the cake for her birthday party without her girlfriend there. So why would you not? I just have a really hard time understanding why you would not drag your girlfriend along to your festivities when you specifically invited her along to be part of those festivities. She doesn't have any friends there. At the end of the day, Kelly comes off as an emotionally manipulative, overly controlling narcissist. She's not fit to be a therapist, and she's probably the worst type of person to be dating Vic. Now, I'm not saying the above behaviors are unrealistic. That's quite the contrary. What I am saying is that it is not a romantic relationship as it appears on the page. If this couple is supposed to be an emotionally abusive lesbian couple, then great job. But I still have questions about why a merc operation, why the most elite merc operation in the galaxy is allowing this sort of emotional abuse on what is supposed to be their best asset. The other characters in this book are hardly worth mentioning. I mean, yes, of course, I love that Dr. Ex-Girlfriend is introduced just to flash back to a sexually abusive moment with her hitting Vic, making her an over-the-top evil immediately so that she can then be credited for cloning Vic later, and that David freaking Locker literally has no purpose but to appear every so often randomly to make a snarky comment about how Vic isn't a human being. I mean, he's just going around violating his own NDA and nobody can do anything apparently. Are you serious? It would have been interesting if David Locker had been a figment of Vic's imagination. Now that would have been a completely different thing to go, you know, randomly seeing this face in the files along with all the other ones that she downloaded, and then talking to Kelly about, hey, you know this guy Locker, because I keep seeing him around the place, and Kelly is like, what the frick are you talking about? It would have been an interesting twist if David Locker didn't exist. And then everybody else who was either named or in passing, they all either fawn over Vic for being the best girlfriend ever, or they're whispering behind her back saying that they hate her for being a robot. It's just so tiresome. And because it needed to happen, Alex and Lyle were hinted at being a gay couple at the very beginning of the book, but then they just pretty much disappear for the remainder of the book because they're really not that important. I don't know why it's necessary. Can somebody tell me why this is really necessary? When it comes to the setting, I don't understand the choice of birthday plus family reunion plus academy reunion. It was really weird and unnecessary for the purpose of this book. And like I said, if Vic is supposed to be relaxing, why would you pick something that is such a high stressor with so many high value people there? At least just bring the parents. But maybe it's that combination of all these weird elements that really contributed to how this plot didn't work. Again, like in the first book, there wasn't much to the world building, which actually left me more confused than the first novel. Initially, I thought the moon base that they lived on was a military thing, but then there was a sex club and a shopping district and whatnot, so still I figured it was a military base where you would have the commissary and military families that all lived there. But then rival mercs also lived and visited the same bars and the same shops. So apparently they had multiple competing merc operations living under the same roof, even though they kind of kill each other. And I didn't really understand that choice. The cloning wasn't integrated into anything, so it felt like a quick answer so that the main character didn't die. And to set up book 3, I don't know where that idea came from in the development of this book, but it didn't come off like it had been thought about in the first book or in the second book. The things introduced in the first novel are completely ignored, from the human-faced robots to the gold-hearted necklace that Kelly gave Vic. You'd think that there would be some continuity of important symbolism like the golden necklace, but none of that is there. There are no Wizard of Oz references when they felt constant in the first book, which makes it even more jarring that they even existed in the first book. And so what is the setting? It's just a convenience. When it comes to the pacing, the short chapters constantly changing POV was still disruptive to the tension, in my opinion, but I don't think that I remember quite as much explanation or exposition between dialogue and for every little thing as in the first book. It was still there, though. Many of the chapters, however, were just straight up summary of events to make time pass, like the shopping spree, and you don't see any of the relationships building. If the book started off closer to where the plot was said to be, then there could have been much more tension with being hunted down on the island by the mercs, while others were trying to keep things casual so Kelly's friends don't catch on. You know, it could have been a lot more like a spy action rom-com, but that was all skipped, and everything was normal on the island until the end, and then it felt like the book knew that it was boring, which is why it skipped over so much stuff. And it should be noted that we didn't hit the book destination until about 40% of the way through. Other areas where the book lacked logic, it starts out with Vic being attacked for her tech. It mentions how other companies want her tech, like so bad to the point that she's being stalked and followed and sabotaged, yet somehow this elite merc unit lets Vic leave the base without protection, without someone watching her, without anything, to go to this planet that doesn't even have security. They specifically mention that there are no officers, no soldiers, no any sort of security on this island. They just basically throw her into a civilian shark tank to be attacked by people who want to strip the tech off her body and steal her from them. How and why? And then they just let David freaking Locker casually walk around knowing that he is breaking his NDA and talking about their technology. Dude, if he's doing that, you're not trying to kill him and make it look like an accident. He's signed a contract. You're mercs. Figure it out. And that was the excuse that they gave. It's, oh, we just don't want it to look like it's on purpose. We want to give people a hint of what not to do. Dude, they all signed the contract. When Vic is dying, she specifically mentions how VC1 has gone away and her body is only operating because of the 37% of it that's still her human brain. But she continues to talk in full sentences. I'm pretty sure that if most of your human brain is offline, you're impaired in some obvious ways. Relating to the tech, VC1 is supposed to have made Vic a super soldier with capabilities the AI just hones in on, yet in every circumstances where the AI should make her supreme, she fails. It would have been interesting to see VC1 as a super soldier robot who doesn't understand human limitations, and her 63% of her always pushing Vic's body past its limits, which would cause her to ultimately collapse, which is what she does. There is such an opportunity for VC1 to have to learn how to help Vic without maxing out her physicality or destroying her human body in pursuit of utilitarian perfection as she's programmed. But instead you have some subpar, undeveloped plot mechanic that makes no sense. This includes that somehow the robot part of Vic can't operate when Vic is stressed. You would think that a robot part like this would specifically engage when the human part is too stressed out to operate. That would kind of create a super soldier, not the computer system that shuts down when the human is overclocked, right? One more thing to highlight, think of even just aiming at the freaking baddie who takes Kelly hostage. The AI program for war doesn't have precision aiming, but a drunk human does. Are you joking me here? Because Vic has to be good at everything. Look, I wouldn't mind it in the books if every single time Vic went on a mission, it was like, oh, we broke a record. Oh, you did this, because the robot optimizes her human abilities and goes above human abilities. But when you have the robot part of her failing at what the robot part is programmed to do, how can you justify making the human better than the robot in every single case? Everything in here is cosmetic to make Vic look good when she's meant to, and feed that emotional lust, which leads me to the mental illness gimmick, because that's what this feels like. The level of PTSD Vic experiences in this book doesn't read as justified from what we witnessed in Threadbare, and it's only proved to be a gimmick when it's mentioned at the beginning in brief and doesn't come back until the end when the AI snaps her fingers and says, by the way, you're cured, no more problems. I mean, are you serious? I thought the rape was stupidly used, unnecessary, and even disrespectful in the first book, but doing this with it in the second book, I was actually mad. As mad as a robot can be. Vic has self-esteem issues and paranoia that are present, but never dealt with, despite the series being all about her emotional instability. It's either because the author has to drag the trauma out for 3 books to make the series work, or it's all just part of an emotional porn gimmick. It's none of them are addressed. It's just kind of there when it's convenient and then disappears when it's not. The trauma in this book is constantly cited in the reviews as a selling point. It's emotional porn and exploitation of trauma and mental illness with no actual exploration, understanding, or acknowledgement of said issues. 2 books in a row, the MC brings a gun to her head, and she's been with the same therapist for like 4 years, and these suicidal talks aren't happening. These talks about her paranoia aren't happening because Kelly is honestly too into herself and wants Vic to suffer so that Vic needs her. But just obviously the therapy isn't working. The military group that she belongs to is not some elite outfit. They're all crazy. And it ends up making this feel like a sales gimmick and shallow writing. If the author really cares about these issues, it's not coming across that way. With this book actually being so much worse than book 1, what promise is it making for book 3? Oh boy. So that is my book review for LBRY's Patchwork, the second book in the Stormfront series, and eventually the third one will come along maybe in a couple of weeks. Why? Because I'm a masochist, and I've already committed to 2 of them. I have to finish it off. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? If not, what do you think of the plot or the elements that are presented here? I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for books you would like me to read and critically review, also drop those in the comments below because I will take a look. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. If you like what I do here, please remember to like this video, share it, subscribe for more, and happy Memorial Day, have a good Monday, and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
Show me your teeth.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mima says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.